So we are live on Facebook, and we've got some guests today. We've got Morgan Mann, who is the Community Relations Director for the Door County Library System. We have Janine Brennan, who is our interim branch manager at the Egg Harbor Library. And then our special guest today is Dave LaLuzerne. Dave, welcome.
Hello.
So Dave and I work together on the Every Day is Earth Day Festival, and I've gotten to know him pretty well through that. And his talent, other than arranging events, is also he's an herbalist. So with that, I'll let you take it away.
Well, welcome everyone to my home here in Ellison Bay. I think all of us are probably anxiously awaiting the real arrival of spring here. I think there's been some signs showing up already. I know that the daffodils and tulips are up, and some of the wild plants are starting to show their early leaves, so that's nice. This actually here is a scene from the Ellison Bluff, one of the most beautiful panoramas, I think, in Door County. A springtime panorama to start out with. So my name is Dave LaLuzerne, and interestingly enough, this is my namesake plant. This is Luzerne, LaLuzerne. This is French word for alfalfa. And so I think that looking back at my origins, you know, LaLuzerne, I think the idea of alfalfa kind of set me in the direction of interest in herbs. When I was young, I grew up on Kinnickinnick Avenue in Milwaukee. And Kinnickinnick is actually the Indian word for the herbs that they use for smoking. Because prior to the advent of white men in the area, the Native Americans used different herbs to smoke. And one of them was uva ursi or Kinnickinnick. And actually Kinnickinnick is a combination of different herbs, including uva ursi. And we'll talk a little bit about uva ursi or bearberry a little bit later. And I also went to pharmacy school. And when I went to pharmacy school at UW, I was interested in the idea that so many of the drugs that we used to take came originally from the plant kingdom. So I became more and more interested in plants. So today we're going to talk about herbs and in particular the spring herbs, ones that you're going to be able to find growing here in Door County. So, but first I wanted to just make a little statement about herbs. Herbal medicine in its holistic sense recognizes humanity as an expression of life, livened with life force, and herbs can work with this whole being, not just specific symptoms. They do function through biochemical interactions and specific applications, but they do so in a way that augments the vital processes of the body. On the biochemical level, the numerous ingredients in an herb work in a synergistic way with elements involved in the process that chemotherapy would not even consider to be active. If we just looked at herbs as a source of valuable chemicals, we would limit their healing power. For beyond the physical level, they can also work on the level of the life force. As they heal our bodies, they may also heal our hearts and minds, for they open the body to a clear flow of integrating and synergizing vital energy. And I think this is something to keep in mind as we go through this, and we'll talk a little bit more about that herbs are really much more complex than drugs and a lot different than drugs. So let's define what is an herb. An herb is any plant or plant part that is used for its therapeutic value. Herbs are complex mixtures of organic and inorganic compounds. Yarrow is a good example of that. This is a plant, Yarrow will be coming up soon. It doesn't flower until later, perhaps the end of June or beginning of July, but that'll be coming up pretty soon. But it's a combination of many different compounds, and they have many different properties. This is the thing that sets herbs apart from drugs, is that they're complex compounds. They're not just simple chemicals. And I think that the nice thing about herbs is that because of their complexity, they work well with our complexity. Our bodies are hugely complex. And there's a lot of functions that have to occur every day for us to survive. So as you can see with Yarrow, has an anti-inflammatory, it's antipyretic, anti-rheumatic, antiseptic, antispasmodic, astringent, carminative, a cicatricant, which is something that helps to heal wounds, diaphoretic, digestive, expectorant, all sorts of things. One of the interesting things about to know about yarrow is if you're out walking in the woods and you have a chance, you know, you get cut and you start to bleed. The yarrow, the leaves, especially leaves crushed up and put on a wound, will stop the bleeding within less than a minute. So it's a really good first aid type of herb to know about when you're out, if you're out in the woods or walking where the yarrow grows, which is mostly in wetlands areas, but on the edge of woods. So herbal science is the art and science of using herbs for promoting health and preventing and treating illness. So the important thing to keep in mind here, I can't advance my thing right now. Wait a minute. Here, sorry about this. My file is not advancing right now.
Well, here, do we want to, why don't we stop the screen share and then,
here it goes, there it goes. Okay, it goes, all right, there it goes. All right, dosage. So the next thing we want to talk about is how should I take these herbs, the dosage forms. And I think this is an important thing to keep in mind because, you know, so often when we talk about taking medicine, we talk about taking a pill or a liquid of some sort or tablets, and they're isolated chemicals. So when we take herbs, we should think about them more at like they're food. And, you know, I think one thing to keep in mind is you are what you eat. So it's important to get a lot, you know, one way to incorporate herbs into your everyday life is to take them with food that you eat. And so here's a lot of examples of food, of course, that has herbs in it. So one of the oldest traditions, of course, of using herbs in the food is Ayurveda. And curries are a good example of that. It was Ayurveda, the 3,000-year-plus old Indian health science, which first introduced the art of personalized cooking. In fact, it went a step further by demonstrating how not only what you eat makes a difference, but how it is prepared also makes a difference. And curries are the most well-known part of Indian cuisine. Most Indian dishes are usually curry-based, prepared by adding different types of vegetables, lentils, or meats in the curry. The content of the curry and the style of the preparation varies from region to region. And in fact, you can see there's a large, these are some of the herbs that are used in different curries. And the way in Ayurveda, they use the curries as a means of treatment, as a means of healthcare. So they would, instead of taking an isolated chemical, an isolated herb even, or an isolated chemical, you would incorporate these herbs into your food. And so a lot of the suggestions that I have, a lot of the herbs that we'll be talking about today, I'll be giving you suggestions how you can incorporate them into your diet, which is one of the best ways to take herbs. So one of the things that I've been doing for the last few years is I've been hosting a dandelion dinner. And dandelion is a most useful herb and also a food. And this was one of the first dandelion dinners that I attended myself, I went to. This was a serving of the food. And the broccoli has a dandelion pesto on it. The dandelion greens were boiled and then had vinaigrette put on them. There was a dandelion leaf lasagna was part of the meal. And then for dessert, there was a dandelion blossom cake, as you can see there. And this was served with dandelion blossom wine. So let's talk a little bit more about dandelion. But first,
my favorite flowers in the sunshine or during a shower. Dandelion, they be popping up everywhere. They don't care. share. Dandelions, they never take a vacation. They're always popping up without invitation. Dandelions, there's always enough to share. Well, I went to the store where the gardeners go to buy me some dandelion seeds. The man behind the counter said, son, don't you know? You don't have to plant them. They grow like a weed. Wow! Dandelions, they don't have to be planted. Why does everyone take them for granted? Dandelions, they're special as you and me. So you wake up in the morning, you're feeling kind of low. Your get up and go is gone. You need some vitamins, some remedies, some tonic, or some tea. Well, look out in your lawn. You got dandelions by the bunch or the bowlful. Eat them all up, they'll make you feel soulful. Dandelions, they're special as you and me. Dandelions, they're good for your liver. Eat them all up, they make you jump up and shiver. Dandelion, they'll make a long liver at you. Dandelions, blow those seeds and make wishes for money, world peace, or lots of sweet kisses. Dandelions, they'll make your wishes come true. Well, I found that song on a children's tape by Lisa Atkinson, and then I added the medicinal verses to it because, you know, we can talk about dandelions, we need to talk about the whole thing. So, all right.
That's my friend from North Carolina, Doug Elliott. He lives on a small farm. He grows lots of his vegetables and raises chickens and uses lots of herbs. And dandelion is really, it is a good food. If you think about dandelions, it's one of the first plants that come up in the spring. And so, you know, years ago, before we had grocery stores in every neighborhood and where people were living, especially up here, perhaps in Door County or Native Americans, you know, they need, after a long winter when they didn't have any fresh vegetables or fresh foods, dandelions was a good herb. And the dandelion leaves, the dandelion roots, the dandelion flower all have nutritional and medicinal value. Leaves are diuretic, especially with water retention due to heart problems. The bitter root compounds stimulate the appetite and promote good digestion. Bitter herbs are something that you really should be aware of because bitter herbs help to improve your digestion and improve your appetite as well. And in fact, you know, oftentimes when you go to nightclubs or restaurants, you know, they'll have serve you a cocktail, and cocktails almost always have bitters in them of some sort. And part of the reason is because they know it promotes digestion, but it also maybe increases your appetite, so you'll eat more. The root has been used for liver diseases such as jaundice and cirrhosis, along with dyspepsia and gallbladder problems. It's high in potassium, calcium, sodium, and salicylic acid. That's part of the nutritive benefit of herbs in general. They're high in vitamins. The yellow flower of the dandelion is loaded with the antioxidant lutein. Many people are buying and spending a lot of money on lutein these days, buying it for their eye health. And that yellow color is in dandelions is lutein. In fact, that's the one nice thing about color. You know, they say get more color in your diet, and that's because almost invariably the same chemicals that give the plant its color are what give the plant its antioxidant activity. So getting more color in your diet is very good. So leaves can be harvested just before flowering and later in summer and used in salads, and can replace spinach in recipes like in the lasagna that I showed you. It makes really good pesto. Another good way to take dandelions is the roasted root. If you roast the roots, if you take the roots, chop them up and roast them for about an hour and a half to 2 hours at 170 degrees in your oven, they'll turn a nice dark brown. And then you you put them in water and you boil them for about 2 to 3 hours, and it gets this really rich, deep, nice, sweet with flavor, with a little bit of bitterness. As you boil these roots, the natural sweetness comes out, and it's not so bitter. And then I like to have it with a little bit of honey. It would be a very good morning drink for replacing coffee, for example. It doesn't have any caffeine in it, of course, but it's good for it would be good for your liver and for your digestion. And you can also make a tea out of the leaf. And also make a tincture. And we'll talk about each of these types of ways of taking herbs. Another way to take herbs is, and the most common way around the world, is as a hot infusion, or what we call a tea. Around the world, most people call tea, when they talk about tea, they're talking about chamomile sinensis, or green tea. But here we call all herbs, all herbal teas, or herbal infusions, I should say, instead of me too, teas. By the way, that's a cup that my wife makes. My wife is a potter up here in Allison Bay, and she makes beautiful cups. One good thing about when you're making your own fresh teas, it's always good to either make them in a pot that's covered, or if you're going to make them in your cup, have a cover on your cup, because that helps to prevent the loss of volatile oils and other things that are have positive effects.
Dave, what's her shop called? Lynn's Pottery?
Lynn's Pottery.
Lynn's Pottery.
Awesome. Does she
have these for sale at the shop?
Yep. These cups are for sale at the shop. So hot infusions draw out vitamins, enzymes, and aromatic volatile oils. A few good herbs for hot infusions include red clover, valerian, nettle, mint, and skullcap. Usually the leaves, we're usually talking about the leaves and the flowers when you're making hot infusions like this way. The basic method is to scoop 1 to 3 teaspoons of dried herb into a cup, pour a cup of boiled water over the top, and then cover it, and then steep it for about 15 minutes to up to an hour and strain. The longer you can steep it, the more of these nutrients are going to come out in the water.
Do you recommend to dry it first and then brew it?
Or you can do it either way. You can either do dried herbs or fresh. There are some exceptions to that rule, that you could do either way. Like mints usually are extract better when they're dried first. So otherwise, using the fresh herb is fine. You can just go pick it up, or if you want to, like with roots, like a lot of roots, which we'll be talking about in a minute with decoctions, they because of their bitterness that they have, if you roast roots for a while, that helps to bring out some of the natural sweetness of the root, and so it won't be quite so bitter. So that'll make it a little bit more palatable, because some herbs can be, can have pretty strong flavors. Then there's a cold infusions are ideal for slimy herbs and herbs with a delicate essential oils. And that would be things like marshmallow root, slippery elm, cleavers, fresh lemon balm. And the basic method is just to place the herbs in a jar or pitcher, fill with cold water and cover, and then allow to infuse overnight. And then you can keep in the refrigerator. Usually you would strain the herbs out if you want to, and then drink it. So the other way, another way is to make them as a decoction. And a decoction is for herbs that are hard, that have more dense materials, like the roots and the dried berries and barks and seeds, because they're denser, and just pouring boiling water over them and letting them steep for a while won't allow the extraction to take place. So a few good herbs would be like dandelion root, echinacea root, wild cherry bark, white oak bark, pine needles. And the basic method is to just place 3 to 4 tablespoons of the dried herb in a small saucepan, cover the herbs with a quart of cold water, slowly heat the water to a simmer and cover, and then allow it to gently simmer for anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. I think the longer you do it, the better it is, and the more flavorful the final product will be. Then you strain, and you can reserve the tea in a quart jar, and you can refrigerate it and rewarm it if you want to. So, and then also another way to use herbs is as baths. You can take a foot bath or a sitz bath or a tub bath. Now, there are herbalists, especially in France, where they recommend that people use the foot bath as a way to take all herbs. One of the problems that a lot of people have with herbs is that they tend to be, they don't taste very good. A lot of them don't taste very good, especially some of the ones that have stronger therapeutic action. And so actually, if by making the tea and soaking your feet in it, or soaking in a bath, you actually will absorb the herb through the skin. And so you can avoid having to have the taste problem. And the other thing about it is if you make it, once you make the strong tea, and then you use it as a foot bath or whatever, especially if it's a foot bath, you can reuse it. You don't have to throw it out every time. You can reuse it for a couple days without having to redo it and everything. So that's one of the nice things about using as in a foot bath. Where if you use it in a bathtub, of course, you're going to drain it out and you won't have it again for use. But the other thing about baths is that you get the aromatherapy part of it, because a lot of herbs have a strong aroma, and there is an action that can be had from the herb by just smelling it, because smelling it can be a relaxing type of thing. And I mentioned the absorption of herbs through the skin. So another way to take herbs, and the one that's used by most herbalists in this country, is tinctures. And tinctures are water alcohol extractions of herbs. Vodka is a popular choice, and some people use vinegar to avoid alcohol. So the advantages of a tincture is that they have a long shelf life. They can last years. I had an herbalist once who was talking about an herbal preparation, herbal tincture that he found that was labeled, and it was 60 years old, and he found it to still be effective. So alcohol is a good preservative, basically, is what that means. Also, you get good absorption of nutrients because they're already in a liquid form. Easy dosage adjustment. With a tincture, you can give as little as 3 or 4 drops to as many as 20 drops or a tablespoonful if required. And so, you can adjust the dosage for children or for senior citizens, or if some herbs are stronger than others, so you don't have to take, you don't have to take a specific amount that you would get like a tablet or capsule. So and also tinctures have faster action for herbs used for acute situations. If you have muscle cramping, there are herbs that can help with muscle cramping, especially women who have uterine cramping during menstruation. Black cohosh tincture can relieve that contraction, those muscle contractions, within just a few minutes. You don't want to wait for a long time for that to happen. Another good another good thing about tinctures is I mentioned the bitters, and like if you have a bitter tonic, which is usually a tincture, alcohol extract, if you have like gassy or bloated feeling after you've eaten something, if you take just a small amount, maybe 10 or 15 drops of a bitters tincture, you can relieve that gas and bloating within 15 to 20 minutes. It works quite fast. So to make a tincture, it's pretty simple. You just chop large leaves, flowers, or roots, leave delicate leaves and flowers whole, then fill the glass jar loosely with the plant material and add enough alcohol to cover the plant materials. Then you seal the jar tightly. Label and date the jar to include the plant parts tinctured and the type of alcohol used, and set aside in a cool, dark place, shaking or stirring daily and adding more alcohol if needed to keep the plant materials covered. So how long would you do it? Well, it depends on the type of, the part of the plant that you're using. For leaves and flowers, you only need to let it sit for about 2 to 3 weeks because they're a lot easier to extract from. For roots and barks, they're denser material. It could take longer for the extraction process to work. So you would let it sit for about 6 weeks. And while you're doing this, you should always shake the bottle up daily. And then after you're done with making the herbal tinctures, some people recommend putting it into like brown or dark colored jars. You can do that, but it's just as well just to put it in a cupboard somewhere so it's out of the direct sunlight, because sunlight can cause the deterioration over a period of time of the herbal product. And then another good way to use herbs is topically, as oils or ointments. Those are specifically applied topically for local areas for specific actions, including like as an anti-inflammatory, an antimicrobial, an antipruritic, which is for itching, an astringent, and pupillation is the effect where you apply something and it causes blood, it causes the area to redden. That means that there's more blood coming to the area, and that can be good for helping to relax muscles and ease pain. And the vulnerary is for wound healing. This is really a good one to use topically. And these flowers, these are usually flowering sometime in the beginning to mid to late June. And in fact, it's called St. John's wort because typically it was thought that they started to bloom on June 24th, which is St. John's, his saint's day in the Catholic Church. So to make the oil, cover the flowers with a good cold pressed olive oil and leave the sealed preparation in the sun for 21 days or until it becomes a rich red. So this is the last year I did this. There's a bottle that I set. This was the first day. And you can see the yellow flowers. Basically what you need to do is just cut off the top yellow flowers with some of their leaves. The flowering tops basically is what you want to put in the jar. And you let it sit in the sun during the day, and then at night you bring it in, and then you put it back out in the sun in the next day. And after about 3 weeks, this is what it looks like. You get this really rich, deep, rich red oil. There's a red oil that is in the plant and the flowers. If you're out and you're picking St. John's wort flowers and you take a flower and you rub it in the palm of your hand, you'll see this red stain which disappears, washes away. But it's really interesting transformation of this plant. So you apply it topically, it will speed the healing of wounds and bruises, varicose veins, and mild burns. And the oil is especially useful for the healing of sunburn. So this is really a good topical first aid oil for all sorts of problems. Another thing that it's good for is nerve pain too. St. John's wort is really good for nerve pain. I've used it for, if you ever have a sciatic problem with your sciatic nerve in your back, going down your leg, just apply that to that, and after you apply it a couple times, the pain will usually go away. It's really quite effective. I have some around all the time. So let's look at some of the herbs now, some of the other herbs. So one of the spring herbs is Burdock Arctium lappa. And the part that's usually used is the root. And the roots are really deep. One of the things, if you are going to dig up this root, you can see that root there is about approximately 18 to 24 inches long. Some of them go even deeper than that. So if you want to uproot it, you got to really dig deep. So it's a valuable remedy for the treatment of skin conditions which result in dry and scaly skin. Part of the action of the herb is through the bitter stimulation of the digestive fluids and especially your bile secretion. Thus, it will aid digestion and appetite. So this is one of those bitter herbs. Externally, it may be used as a compress or poultice to speed up the healing of wounds and ulcers. Sometimes if you are into Japanese food and you go to a sushi bar, sometimes they'll serve a vegetable they call gobo, which is basically the inner stalk of the burdock tree, of the burdock plant. So it is edible. If you take the lower parts of the stalk and you peel off the outer skin and then boil it, it can be used as a vegetable. You can also use the fresher parts of the roots as a vegetable. They are kind of bitter, so cooking them for a little while helps a lot. And then sometimes it's good to make them with vinegar because that kind of counteracts the bitterness a little bit. These are also herbs, again, are very high in minerals. This one is high in chromium, iron, magnesium, silicon, and thiamine, one of the B vitamins. So you can make a decoction or a tincture out of this. Again, this would be a good treatment for one of the conditions would be good for would be acne, for kids who have acne problems. In fact, we talked about taking herbs topically, and this is a good one to use topically. Since it doesn't taste so good, you can make for kids or anybody who has acne problems, if you make get a good clay, and you make the clay and you use as the water to making the clay, you use a tincture partly of the burdock root, and that'll give that astringency to it. and that'll also help to treat the acne and to help it clear up faster. And then you apply the mask, and you should leave it on for, if you put a mask on for acne, you should leave it on for at least an hour to 2 hours. I remember my daughter used to do it, and she would leave it on overnight. She'd put it on at night before she went to bed, leave it on overnight, and wash it off the next day. Really can make a big difference for that particular condition, or any kind of eczema or psoriasis as well. The ramps are starting to come up, and also known as wild leeks. And the first thing that comes up with the leaves, and eventually you'll see the flowers, and then that you can harvest the bulb. Most people recommend harvesting just the leaves, and they do have a very strong flavor, and you can use them in your food. We're fortunate here in Door County in that we have an extreme abundance of leeks. I mean, there's one 40-acre plot that I go to, wooded plot that I go to harvest mine. There's literally tens of thousands of leeks growing on it. I mean, and you can see them growing all over, when I'm driving down the highway, down Old Stage Road. I mean, you can look in the wooded areas, and you can just see that they're some of the first plants that come up in the spring. So it's a spring tonic in Native American medicine and used to treat colds, sore throat, and worms in children. Traditionally, the leaves were used in the treatment of colds and croup. The warmed oil extract of the leaves and bulbs is used externally in the treatment of earaches. So if you make this as an oil extract, and basically when you apply oil in the ear, that's an external use. So it's an oil you're applying externally. And if you're going to use the ramps, if you have the leaves and or the bulbs, you have to cover them oil. You should let them sit for a day or two before you use them to get a good extraction into the oil. So it's a pungent herb with properties similar to garlic. So one of the things that garlic is there is some anti-inflammatory compounds in it, so it's good for inflammation. Bulbs were traditionally baked in the fire or dried for use as a food to reduce acidity. They were used mainly as flavoring in salads and savory dishes. Has a mild sweet flavor resembling leeks. I like to make a leek potato soup out of it, which is really quite delicious. And one of the things that I do is I take the bulbs and I chop them up and dry them, and then I store them and I use them throughout the winter. I can add them to soups and stews and stuff for a nice flavor. Lady slipper is an herb that has been traditionally been used medicinally, but now is considered an endangered species. We're fortunate here in Door County that we have quite a good growth of, especially the yellow lady slipper. But this is one that you should not harvest, but I just thought I'd bring it up because it is a spring flower. It was used to specific remedy to overcome depression, mental anxiety, and troubled sleep. It was often recommended for women for both emotional and physical imbalances related to menopause or menstruation, such as nervous tension, headaches, or cramps. Large doses may cause headaches and also disorientation, so you only need small amounts of it. What's usually used is the alcoholic extract, because I mean, you can make a large amount of alcohol extract with just a small little root. But again, I mean, if you have some growing on your property and you harvest them sustainably, but it is one of the most beautiful spring plants, and one that has been used in the past medicinally. So garlic mustard is one that's an invasive plant. Actually was brought here by the English settlers, and because they grew it as a pot herb, and they grew it in their gardens and it escaped from the gardens. So the young leaves add a mild garlic flavor to salads and pestos. This is really a good herb to use for pestos and in salads. The leaves have a very definite smell and taste of garlic. If you've ever tried to, get rid of your garlic mustard, you know that it has a very strong fragrance. They are slightly bitter with a sweetish aftertaste that make an excellent addition to salads. It also gives a delicate flavor to such bland foods as eggs and sauces. With cooking, they lose their aroma while retaining most of their bitterness and are better raw. So during the leaves were applied dressings to open sores and for edema and to induce sweating. Sweating is a good thing to if you have someone who has pale, dry skin. Sweating can help to cool or excessive heat, like heat rash. Sweating is a good thing because sweating allows the body to release these fluids, and then as they evaporate, they cool you. And also, the stomach, it helps digestion. Another good herb for the digestion. So this would be a really good one to add to like your spring salads. Bloodroot of the spring, and they call it bloodroot because if you take harvest the root and cut open, it bleeds. It literally looks like it's bleeding red blood, as you can see from that picture. So it has been used historically in numerous topical preparations for the treatment of various skin cancers, and also for sores, warts, eczema, and other epidermal and epidermal problems. It also has been used internally in herbal preparations for congestion, lung conditions such as emphysema and chronic bronchitis. It is considered to be toxic somewhat, not that it's going to kill you. For a while there was actually a company that was making a toothpaste and mouthwash that had an extract called sanguinaria in it, which has come from the, or sanguine, which is comes from the sanguinaria, which is found in bloodroot, which kills bacteria and stops them from converting carbohydrates into gum tissue eating acid and blocks enzymes that destroy collagen in gum tissue. So this would be a good mouthwash for someone who has gum problems. And you would just make a wash out of it, like with water, and then you would spit it out afterwards, so you wouldn't have to worry, there would be no toxic effects from using it occasionally. So usually you make a fresh extract with fresh root with alcohol or vinegar. I've used it topically to get rid of small little growths on my skin, like warts and stuff like that. You can actually make a strong extract or alcohol extract with it, and then just put a few drops and let it dry on the wart or on the skin growth. And after over a period of several weeks, you can actually see it disappear. We see growing early in the spring. And
looks like this screen might be frozen.
Remedy the treatment of bronchitis may be used
I'm just gonna have Dave pause for a minute.
irritations, wounds.
Oh no, hold on. Dave, can you hear us?
I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it looks like your screen share went away.
Yeah, it did. All right. I've got it back, I thought.
We're testing the limits of our techiness here.
Well, it says my connection is unstable right now. That's what it's telling me.
Okay, well, we'll just keep going, and then if it freezes again, then we'll just kill the slideshow and you can take questions. How about?
Yeah, can you see it now?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, see, now I'm stuck. Now I'm stalled again.
Well, why don't we just you want to just?
Does anybody have questions at this point?
Well, I have a question actually. So,
right.
the ramps, they look a lot like the deadly. Well, I don't know what the deadly. What are they? There's a evil twin that they have.
Oh, I'm not sure what that
What is
is.
it? There's a like, isn't there something that like is kind of deadly? It's like a white flower.
The ramps. Well,
Yeah.
the one thing nice thing about ramps is that they have such
Lily of the Valley.
oh,
That's what it
lily of
is.
the
Lily
valley.
of the Valley. That's the thing you got to
Yeah,
watch out for with that one.
yeah. Well, lily of the valley itself isn't deadly. Actually, the worst part of the lily of the valley is the root. So the leaves themselves aren't so bad. Oh,
Oh
there
wait,
we
looks
go.
like we're going again.
We got it going again there. So the ramps, the nice thing about the ramps is they have such a distinctive odor. I mean, you can just walk through them and you'll smell them. And the lily of the valley doesn't have that fragrance. The leaves, what the lily of the valley has a digitalis like glycoside in it, which can have an effect on the heart, and that usually isn't a problem unless you're take a really large dose of it. And
Okay.
so
Okay.
they say for kids, that they shouldn't be eating them. It may make you sick. You're more likely to throw up than anything if you take any amount of them. And so it's usually not such a problem. Stall again.
Do you mind, would you start over this slide, the violet slide? Because I think we might have missed this part of it in the internet.
Okay, I can, but I'm stalled again too.
Well, shoot. The internet, I tell ya.
Well, I think this may be my computer, unfortunately. I think I've been having some problems. Oh, wait, there we go.
Oh.
So let's go, we can go back. Wait a minute.
No, we can go from here, Dave. That's okay.
Okay. So the plantain is the next one that comes up pretty early. It helps to quickly staunches blood flow and encourages the repair of damaged tissue. Usually use it topically. There's two kinds of plantain, the Plantago major, which is the one in the upper left-hand corner, and then the Plantago lanceolata, which is the one in the lower corner. They both are members of the same family. They both have the same properties, but they do look a little different. You chew the leaves. This is really a good one for insect bites or mosquito bites. If you have a bite, if you chew the leaves, and they are somewhat bitter tasting, and then apply it as a poultice to wherever you have the bite, it can actually stop the swelling. And the sooner you can put it on, the better. So it's good for snake bites. This is one of the snake roots that the Native Americans had a lot of plants that they called snake roots because they were good for snake bites. And this is one of them. So plantain ointment is good for treatment for cuts and bruises, for eczema, psoriasis, hemorrhoids. It acts as a gentle expectorant while also soothing inflamed and sore membranes, making it ideal for coughs and mild bronchitis. So this would be a good tea to brew if you had a problem with bronchitis. The seeds are closely related to psyllium seeds and can be used similarly. A tablespoon or two soaked in hot sweetened water or fruit juice until a mucilage is formed, and the whole gruel drunk as a lubricating laxative. In fact, plantain, one of the species of Plantago is Plantago psyllium, and that's where they have much bigger seeds. The Plantago lanceolata, which is the one that's in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see the little brown seeds on there. So this has a lot more seeds. So those would be the best ones to harvest, other than the major one, which is in the top left-hand corner, because that one, the seeds are much more, there's like a little tail, I call it a rat tail, that sticks up out of the center of the plant that has the seeds on it. And they're not as easy to access, to use. So a juice on a piece of cotton applied to a tooth cavity can cause cases of toothache as well. So it can be a very useful plant. And this is one that grows in a lot of disturbed areas, where soil has been disturbed, like after snow plowing, during the winter. Growing alongside your driveway or areas where there's trample downs take over. This is bearberry, which is also the one known as uva ursi, the one that I mentioned earlier on is used in Kinnick as it means bear is grape in Latin, and uva for grape and ursus for bear. Arctostaphylos is from the Greek for arctos, meaning bear, and staphel, a bunch of grapes. Bears are fond of the fruit, so that's why they call it bearberry. Native American people used it as a urinary remedy and also enjoyed smoking a blend of uva ursi leaves and tobacco, which was the smoking mixture Kinnikinnick. It's one of the best natural urinary antiseptics. It has been used extensively in herbal medicine to disinfect and astringe the urinary tract in cases of acute and chronic cystitis and urethritis. So with this one, you would make a decoction, and you would put a cup of boiling water, 1 teaspoon in a cup of water, and let it boil to a half hour or so. And then you can drink up to 3 cups a day, or you can make a tincture out of it. It's the diuretic most often used in herbal weight loss formulas as a diuretic. So if you see, you might see it listed as uva ursi, or you might see it listed as Arctostaphylos, but it is often in weight loss formulas. And it is among the herbs useful in diabetes for excessive sugar. So if someone has a diabetic problem, this would be a good tea to drink on a, maybe once a day, have a cup of this tea to help restore blood sugar balance. This one, bearberry is one, actually, I was up on Europe Bay Road, and there alongside the road, there's a whole big, huge, large patch of it growing right now with the berries. It survives the winter under the snow, and it's still green in the spring. Herb Robert is a real common, and it's considered an invasive plant. It's a geranium. It's a geranium family member. It's employed in much the same way as American cranesbill, which is effective against stomach ulcers and inflammation of the uterus. So the fresh roots taste like parsnips, and they are a delicacy when cooked or baked in bechamel sauce. So if you want to use the herb, you use 2 teaspoons of the dried herb per cup of cold water, letting the mixture steep overnight. You never boil this herb, you just let it, this is a cold infusion you want to make out of this one. And then a daily dosage of it is of 2 cups. Some people make a wine out of this for chronic gastric inflammation. They fill a jar half and half with freshly plucked, chopped herb Robert and a good red wine, and let the mixture stand for 2 weeks before straining it into a corked bottle. And you take 2 to 3 sips before meals. This has a little bit of bitterness to it, and it's anti-inflammatory because of its astringency. So it's really good for a person who has chronic stomach problems. A good pot herb that comes up early in the spring, and it's the best time to harvest it is the nettle. Is the best time to harvest it in the spring. The nettle leaves are a blood builder, often used as a spring tonic and to treat anemia and poor circulation. And by a blood builder, it means it has a lot of nutrients that help you to especially the liver function and all those areas where you're actually making red blood cells. So it gives you those nutrients that you need for that. Nettle seed can be used as a kidney trophal-restorative, literally a food for the kidneys. So if you have a kidney problem, nettle seed, which you obviously have to harvest later in the summer, is a good treatment for chronic kidney problems. Nettle is used by asthmatics. You mix the juice of the leaves or roots with honey and take to relieve bronchial or asthmatic troubles. When you say the juice, basically you make a strong tea out of it and mix it with honey. Both a tea and a poultice of cooked nettles are used to treat eczema and other skin conditions topically. So you just apply it to the eczema. And another, as I mentioned, nettles is full of nutrients. It's got lots of calcium, magnesium, potassium, up to 9 grams of protein in a 30 gram, which is 1 ounce of the herbs, and up to 11.9 grams of carbohydrates. So it's very highly nutritive. It's a good food. This would be a good herb to use early. Pick the early leaves in the spring and add them to salads or to soups. You can also make an infusion out of these or a tincture and use to preserve the one. Like I said, the nice thing about tinctures, if you want to use something on an ongoing basis, it preserves the herb and the herbal extract. You get a complete extract of the herb and it doesn't deteriorate over time. Pineapple weed is a nice one. This one is the one that grows along in disturbed areas. It's found in hard-packed ground and along open fields and roadsides or in parking lots. Like I've seen it growing along the roads here in Garrett Bay Road, and it just really starts early in spring. And it's actually related to chamomile. So it makes a soothing, relaxing, soothing tea. An infusion will allay symptoms of influenza and digestive disorders. So it helps to calm your stomach. That's the symptom. It's not an anti-influenza thing. What it does is it settles your stomach. It's also antiemetic. That means it helps to restore, it helps to get rid of worms. Externally, it can be used as a mouth rinse for mouth sores and topically in treatments for skin disorders. So a strong mouthwash, this is really good for a person who had like canker sores or mouth sores. You can use it as a mouthwash. You make a strong tea, strong infusion out of it. This is one that would be good to make like a cold infusion, where you would make it, put the water over the herb and let it sit overnight to make a strong cold infusion. The flower heads can be eaten raw or cooked. Add them to salads, vegetable casseroles, and stir fries. For the infusion, use 2 to 3 teaspoonfuls in water for 10 minutes, 3 to 4 times a day. If you want to make a tea, that's good for a relaxing tea. Tincture, 1 to 4 mils, 3 times a day. And for a bath, you could use it in a bath. You take 4 teaspoons of the dried herb, 500 mils of water, and strain into a bath. And again, this would be, if you want to use it for a bath, it'd probably be a good idea to make a cold infusion out of this and then use that the next day for your bath. Red clover is another early spring flower. And it may be used with complete safety in case of childhood eczema. It may also be of value in other chronic skin conditions such as psoriasis. So you can use it orally or you can use it topically, and you can make a strong infusion out of this. The expectorant and antispasmodic action give this remedy a role in the treatment of coughs and bronchitis, but especially in whooping cough. Back around the turn of in the early 20th century, whooping cough was a bad problem around the country, and there really wasn't any treatment for it. They didn't have the vaccine for it at the time, and so a lot of people would die from it because they had the spasmodic coughing. But eclectic physicians who were doctors that use a lot of herbs, they would use a strong, either a syrup of red clover or a tea, and it would help stop that spasmodic coughing. It's also used as part of a holistic treatment for breast tumors and fibroids. In fact, there are some estrogenic type compounds in it, and it's believed that one of the actions of those estrogen compounds is that they block estrogen receptors. A lot of women who have breast cancer have cancers that are sensitive to estrogen levels in the body. So to the extent that they can block those estrogen receptors, they can block the effect of estrogen on the breasts. It's also a mineral tonic and nutritive, another one of those plants is very high in nutrients. You can use an infusion or a tincture. The Native Americans would use clover in several ways. They would use the foliage was eaten fresh before the plant flowered, or it was cooked by placing moistened layers of plants one upon another in a stone oven. So you can use it as a pot herb, as a herb. You could use it, maybe put it into salads or soups and stews. One way to get it into your diet. Motherwort is another herb that can be very useful. It grows wild around Door County. I know I have some growing all around my property. It's valuable in the stimulation of delayed or suppressed menstruation, especially where there is anxiety or tension involved. It's a really calming herb. It's also a useful tonic for aiding in menopausal changes. And it may be used to ease false labor pains. It is an excellent tonic for the heart, strengthening without straining. It is considered to be a specific in cases of tachycardia or heart palpitations. So if you have a problem with heart palpitations, this would be a good herb to take. I've made tinctures out of this for myself, and I use it. I have an ongoing heart issue, and often I'll use hawthorn for it, which is really a good one too. But if I don't have hawthorn, I will use the motherwort. And interesting, the Latin name Leonaris cardiaca means lion-hearted. So you can make an infusion of the leaves of the flowering tops. Usually you don't want to start using it until it starts to flower. And if you make a tincture, you just use the top 3 or 4 or 5 inches of the plant when you're making a tincture. You can use the whole thing, the leaves and the flowers, and you can tincture it, make a tincture out of that. And then you take that 1 to 4 milliliters. 4 milliliters is approximately a teaspoonful, up to 3 times a day. When I take it, I usually, if I make the tincture, I usually take a tablespoon once a day, just to make it a little easier so I don't forget to take it. False Solomon seal is another early spring plant. And the root is effective demulcent and expectorant, good in the inflammatory stages of infections and for sore throats. It is used for treating rheumatism and kidney problems. It has been used to treat congestive heart failure. There's actually a compound in it called convalescent, which strengthens the contractions of the heart, slows the pulse, normalizes blood pressure, stimulates respiration, and increases the appetite and rate of digestion. So it's really nice. The way I prepare it for that, I make a tincture out of it. I use it myself. I also think it's a good lubricating tonic for the joints. It's because it does have a demulcent, which is a soothing effect, but it also has some anti-inflammatory properties. So I used it for many years for my knee. I had a bad knee until I had a knee replacement about 3 years ago. And I would make a tincture in brandy. And the root has a natural sweetness to it. It's, if you take the fresh root and chew on it, you'll taste sweetness, and then it gets a little bit bitter. But if you make a tincture, the brandy extract of it is really quite delicious and easy to eat and easy to take. And so I would take that. I would take about a tablespoon of that as a tonic for my arthritic, for my knee joint, and it would really seem to work well. As it's not going to restore your joint to health, but it's going to help to keep down the inflammation, which is what causes the pain. Now, there's a couple of herbs that, of course, the pines are one that we see all year round, and this is a nice one. It flowers in the spring, but this is a good one to have around because the tea made from the young needles is used to treat sore throat. Is a good source of vitamin C, and so is effective against scurvy. But is one of the reasons that's taken. Scurvy causes gum problems, which is another reason why it's good for sore throats, because that's similar tissues. But it's also has some expectorant action, and which makes it good for the lungs. And so this is a good expectorant. This is a good herb. This is one of those herbs that you have to brew, as a decoction. And I usually just use, instead of the inner bark, I usually just get the pine needles and I put them in water and I boil them for about 2 to 3 hours. It's just a mild boil, a light boil. And the liquid, interestingly enough, turns this beautiful red color. And then I add a little honey to it and I make a nice syrup out of it. Sometimes I'll do that with wild cherry bark. I'll take the bark of some branches of a wild cherry, and I'll boil it together with the white pine and get the wild cherry. I mean, years ago, wild cherry was a common expectorant herb that was used for congestion in the lungs. And so a tea like this would probably be beneficial for people who are starting to feel congestion in their lungs, and may be beneficial for someone who was suffering from the COVID virus, who started to get that lung congestion, which is the big problem with the COVID virus. And the resin of the pine trees is antiseptic. So, if this is a good, this is like nature's bandage. If you have a cut and you get some of that sap, the resin that comes out of the pine trees when the branch is broken, and you apply that, that'll help to hold the wound closed, and also has antiseptic action. So it acts like nature's bandage, if you will. And I thought I mentioned elderberry, even though it's not the flower. It does flower in spring, but the berries are what's usually used. And this has gotten a lot of play on the internet recently because of the COVID virus. So elderberries, both the flowers and fruits, have been shown to decrease the chances of contracting the flu, which is not what COVID is. Remember, it's similar to the flu, but it's not. So there is actually no research to show that this is going to do the same thing for flu. But a lot of people are using this. And it decreased the chances of contracting the flu, and it may shorten its durations if you happen to get it. So with flu, it's been shown in double-blind placebo-controlled studies to reduce the symptoms to 3 to 4 days. And usually a flu will usually run its course in about 7 to 10 days. So one of the things that's been shown to do in one study is that it increases cytokine production, which strengthens cell membranes to prevent virus penetration. So I would not say that, this is not what I would use as a treatment for flu. For flu maybe, but not for COVID virus, but it may be useful if you're concerned about catching the virus to be taking elderberry syrup. And you can make your own syrup if you can get the elderberries. Now, the one thing, there has been some information about toxicity of elderberries. There is 2 varieties of elderberries. There's the Sambucus nigra, and then there's a Sambucus europa, I think it's called. Has a red berry. The elderberry that you want is the one that has a dark purple to black berry when it's ripe. And it does start out red, but it turns red, this dark purple, as you can see in that picture. And that's the one that's perfectly safe to use. There was actually, there was a product that's been on the market for some years that was made in Israel called Sambucol, which is a elderberry syrup, which is quite expensive. But you can make your own by filling a quart jar with berries, cover with apple cider vinegar, let sit for 3 to 4 days. Then you strain it through cheesecloth and add an equal amount of honey and gently heat to dissolve the honey. Store it in the refrigerator for up to 3 months, and then you take 1 tablespoonful twice daily. So if you were going to use it, it's best used as a preventative, as a tonic. A lot of people would this was in areas where it grows, it was not unusual for people to make this syrup and use it as a tonic, like 1 tablespoon a day throughout this winter to help prevent colds and flus. So if you're interested in more information about herbs, I have a YouTube channel called Herb TV, and on it I have about 140 different little short videos that range anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes to up to half-hour long about herbs and how to use them. And so that's the website there, YouTube. And if you just go to YouTube and search for Herb TV, you can find it. And that's what I got for you. So herbal peace, a little bit of herbal peace is what I have for you. So I'd be happy if there's any questions to answer anybody's questions.
I'm going to unmute everyone. Morgan, there was a question that came over on Facebook.
Correct. It was, what do you know about the benefits of pomegranate juice?
Well, juices in general have very similar actions. And most of the time when different juices have had varying amounts of scientific studies done on them. For one reason or another, pomegranate juice, it's been real popular. So there's been people who have done studies. And most of the benefits of these juices, from what I've seen, are from the high antioxidant content. And the thing about any fruit juice, pomegranates or elderberries or wild, or cherries or any kind of wild fruits that you could pick, raspberries, they're all very, very high in antioxidants. And so I don't think that one juice is any more beneficial than another. And so much of what I see is basically used for promotional benefit, for promotional effect, because they want to promote the use of their juices. So I think juices in general are very good to get. I think juices of plants just have so many benefits because of the antioxidants. And that's basically what I think what gives pomegranate its benefits. And so I don't think it's any better than any other juice, though, in terms of its benefits. One of the other thing about antioxidants is that they do have anti-inflammatory action. So oftentimes they'll talk about juices and their anti-inflammatory benefits, but that's because of the high antioxidant content.
While we're kind of like on the berries, and Barb had hoped that maybe you could repeat some information about the bearberry, because that's where it kind of got cut off.
Okay,
so,
the bearberry?
Yeah,
well,
don't feel like you need to go back in the slideshow.
Right. So
yeah.
it's basically it's good for urinary tract problems. So if you have a chronic urinary tract problem, you know, oftentimes they'll talk about, you hear about cranberry juice. There's another one of those juices that we're talking about, cranberry juice for urinary tract infections. Well, if you take cranberry juice and you mix it with bearberry or kinnikinnick tincture, you're going to get a much more beneficial effect. It has antiseptic activity in the urinary tract, and it also has some anti-inflammatory. So it helps to reduce the irritation in the infection. You know, the thing is about herbs in general, they're not so much that they kill bacteria, so much as what they do is they promote the body's natural ability to remove bacteria from the system. I mean, that's what our immune system does. And so what herbs can do is they can improve your body's ability to remove these bacteria from your system. It's almost like they help to make them slide out of your system, if you will. I mean, they don't kill them so much as they try keep them tracked in check, and they prevent the urinary tract, the stinging sensation when you urinate. So it's good to take them even if you're taking an antibiotic for urinary tract infection. But you know, if you're willing to do it, if you drink plenty of juice, cranberry juice with bearberry and lots of water to flush your kidneys, that can be a very effective way to treat especially a chronic problem. If you have a chronic problem where you have recurring infections, that's the best time to use something like kinnikinnick, because that, you know, just using it once a day or maybe even only a couple times a week can be beneficial at preventing that infection from constantly recurring.
And one follow-up question that Barb had on there, do you know if there's bearberry on Europe Lake Road?
Yes, that's where it grows all along the road there.
Cool.
And it grows, right now it's got a lot of berries on it too, in fact.
She says yippee. And then Morgan, you said there was another question on Facebook?
Right. Mike asked, what are some good local sources for bittering agents?
Well, I think dandelion, what I use a lot is dandelion root. If you take dandelion root, it is very bitter if you just eat it straight. I mentioned how I also like to roast it, and that helps to bring out some of the sweetness. But if you, what I usually do is I take dandelion roots, chop them up, and I tincture them, and I usually use vodka. And again, since they're root, you have to let it sit for about 4 to 6 weeks. I go for the long end, usually 6 weeks, and shaking them up every day. And then you can strain the roots out and just have the tincture. And then the other thing the way I do it to make it taste a little bit better, because it's pretty bitter, not as bitter as some things, but is to take, like, if you have some spearmint or mint and make a tincture out of that. And that one, with a tincture with the leaves like that, you only need to let that sit in alcohol for a couple of weeks. But then if you combine those two tinctures together, then you have the mint as well as the bitters, dandelion bitters. I also mentioned the burdock root was a good one. But any plant that tastes bitter has bitters in it. So, you know, most of the greens that historically salads were bitter greens. And that would be like your dandelion leaf, or arugula is somewhat bitter. You know, some of the other greens that, you know, that come up naturally early in spring. Um, the There's one that I just learned about, which is the Dame's Rocket, which the greens are are edible, but they're a little bit bitter. So, you know, salads historically were made of bitter greens and were usually eaten after the main course, not before the main course, because that would aid in digestion and the production of acid and enzymes. One of the things that bitters do is it increases, you know, you have taste buds in your tongue that can taste 5 different flavors: there's sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami, which is the savory flavor. And a lot of people never take anything bitter. So, but when you stimulate the bitter taste buds, it sends a signal to your digestive tract, hey, you know, it's time for digestion, and you could get you know, release of enzymes and acid that's needed for digesting meat. And so it's really a good thing to have to improve your digestion. And if you have a chronic digestive problem, I always recommend taking bitters. You know, you only need to take 5 to 10 drops or so. And if you don't like the taste, you can dilute it in a little bit of water. But it is important to taste it because you want to stimulate taste buds. And take some bitters before every meal. And over a period of time, maybe several weeks, you'll find your digestion will return to normal. And it can really be good for treating things like ulcers and chronic digestive problems of all sorts. Ulcerative colitis, I think is beneficial for, along with astringent herbs. You would want to get astringent herbs for that as well.
Well, David, thank you so much. There's one last question. Do you offer classes or workshops?
Yes, I do. One of the things I do during the spring and summer, is I do herb walks. And I take people out to different parts of Door County. Like I usually start with one on Ellison Bluff because, you know, when the spring flowers are in. And so if people are interested in those, if they send you their email address and you could forward that to me, I could put them on my list and I can let them know when I'm going to be doing my herb walks. I also do classes in the fall. One I do, or in winter, I should say. One that I do is for the Door County Learning and Retirement series. That's done through UW Extension in Door County. It's just in Sturgeon Bay. And the other one is the Clearing. I do an herb class usually at the Clearing. So those are the formal classes I have, and people can sign up for those. But the herb walks I think are really the best way, because then we can get out into find the plants. You can see what they look like, and I can tell you about the plants right there, and it's much more immediate, I think, than having a class.
Well, thank you so much, Dave. One last comment is someone said, Barb said, great presentation, so interesting. We really appreciate you coming on and, you know, experimenting with us and this whole online programming. And thanks to everybody that tuned in. And
thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Morgan, do you have anything that you want to add at the end for other programs?
Well, thank you for attending. Like Jess said, it's all brand new to us, and we're excited to reach out to everyone who is looking for some connection right now. So check both the library's Facebook page and also the Kress's Facebook page. We're going to be having more events coming up. Next week is National Library Week, and so we're going to be celebrating with some information about the most banned books for 2019, and then we're also looking at starting a couple other presentations next week.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks, Dave.
Okay, have a good
Bye,
day,
guys.
everyone.
Thank you.